Thank you so much, Amena, for joining us at Edge of Faith magazine. I have the great pleasure and honor of interviewing you today. You, as a spoken word poet, speaker, author, and let's just be honest, a Renaissance woman. If I could just let you know, I am a huge fan. Your spoken word poetry literally elicits every imaginable emotion. I laugh, I cry, I just kind of grit my teeth on frustrating parts, and you just touch the full range of emotion in your work. So I am greatly honored to interview you today, and welcome.
Oh my gosh, what a heartwarming way to open this conversation. Oh, I'm really excited to just be on Edge of Faith. So I'm looking forward to talking with you.
Fabulous. Well, would you mind just starting out talking about your new book, How to Fix a Broken Record?
Um, yeah, so How to Fix a Broken Record is a spiritual memoir. It is written in 7 parts, and each part has corresponding shorter chapters according to a topic, and each part has an album that also goes with it that I sort of review the album and why it was important to me regarding that topic and just that time in my life too.
I love this blend of story, of poetry, of music. This is just fabulous. Well, first, let's talk about what inspired you to write How to Fix a Broken Record.
Wow. In short, the first few years of my 30s. To be honest. I mean, I was trying to think about, if whenever I'm going to do anything creative, whether it's, writing in book form or writing poetry or performing on stage, I'm always thinking about, what are the current lessons of life that I'm learning. And so I sort of did a review at that time of the first few years of my 30s and wanted to pick up on where my first book kind of left off. And my first book, Breaking Old Rhythms, kind of leaves off at, my husband and I were getting engaged and were just getting married. I think maybe I had just covered a little bit of that point. So I wanted to sort of pick up on, there are some stories I told in the first book that I didn't tell the full story of, that the full story is in How to Fix a Broken Record. And then I wanted to pick up on, that piece of life that was happening after my first book. And I wanted to be able to talk about, what it was like our first few years being married and some of the details of my dating life that I didn't really go into a lot of detail about in my first book. So I kind of wanted to cover some of those things in the book, but it really, the title of the book came to me in a conversation I was having with my dad, actually, and it was a hard conversation. It was very tough. It was a tough time in our family, but there was something about our conversation, even though it was a hard conversation, that brought some healing to me, because I realized in that conversation with my dad that there were some things, based on my upbringing and based on the places that, my heart had been broken and different things, that I believed certain things about myself and about God and about life. And there was something about that conversation with my dad, that there were particular things I had believed about myself that I realized, oh, that's not true. I've been believing a wrong thing about myself. I've had this message repeating in my life that is false. And I have an opportunity to instead let the truth repeat in my life. And that brought about all these thoughts about vinyl records and what it's like for us to have, metaphorical, broken records in our lives as well. So I think that's where a lot of the title and sort of the thread of the book came from. And the form of the book, I read a lot of books written by comedic women before I started writing How to Fix a Broken Record. So I read a lot of Mindy Kaling and Issa Rae and Amy Poehler and Tina Fey. I also read Questlove's memoir, Mo Meta Blues. And I read another memoir by Rob Sheffield called Love is a Mixtape. So with the last 2 books, being able to see how music can, mark time also in the writing of a book, I was really interested in playing around with that for How to Fix a Broken Record too.
And there's such a rhythmic quality to your poetry. I can really see how this all ties together. Well, looking at this.
Yeah,
Oh, go ahead. So sorry.
Go ahead, sorry. Well, I was going to say, I guess in being a poet, it's hard it's hard to avoid even in my prose writing that I'm just always going to be going back to some of that rhythm. And I was a music journalist many, many years ago too. So I loved that about being a music journalist, that because you were writing about art, you could also sort of employ some of those rhythms too. So I enjoyed not having to stifle that part of my voice writing this book.
That's amazing. You know, I have to say it's pretty brave to explore in a public way, for example, the hard times within your family, or even, frankly, stories about dating. I would be mortified if anyone knew half the stories I would have to tell. So would you mind sharing some of the experiences that you wrote about in How to Fix a Broken Record? And then, as I had asked before, could I ask you to recite one of your poems?
Sure, I can definitely. I've actually got one poem that's in the book. So people always ask that when they come to the merch table. They're like, "Are your poems in this book?" And I'm like, "Well, in this book, there's one poem." So I will totally share that one. Yeah, I wanted to write about my experiences dating because I hadn't read a lot of books, particularly books that were about a faith journey that really talked about those experiences, even when you're walking through those experiences and you're not sure that they're going to end up in happiness or in love or in a spouse or anything. There was a lot of trial and error going on there. And I really had never I just hadn't read a lot of books that I saw anyone writing about that. And I thought that was important to write about, because I think for those of us who either get married, maybe later in life, whatever later in life is, depending on where you're from, and the dynamics of that, for some people later in life is like 22 years old, but depending on where you're from, if you're, ending up single, into your late 20s, particularly into your 30s and 40s, there's like less and less conversation about how you navigate that. And how you don't always walk into the supermarket and meet that one person and like that's the person you'll be with the rest of your life, So I wanted to really take some time to explore that time in my life and hope that some other people reading the book would feel seen and feel known and feel understood by me sharing some ignorant things that happened in there. But yeah, all of those stories were very true. I just did a show here in Atlanta over the weekend, and I was trying to think like, man, what dating story would I tell? And the one that I thought about, which I mentioned briefly in the book, I dated this man. At the time, he was like 10 years older than me. So I was probably like 26, but he's 36. So he's very at this very comfortable place in his career. He sort of was really just looking for a woman to marry and be very domesticated in his life. He's looking for somebody to cook him food and, have babies and raise babies for him and do these things, which at the time I was kind of broke. So I was thinking about it a little bit. Like, do I want to do this? Because I feel like I'd probably at least get like some mani-pedis out of it. I wouldn't have to work, whatever. And then I was like, oh gosh, I have too many books to write. I'm not going to be able to be what this man needs. But yeah, we went on a couple of dates, and I think our third date, I took him to a poetry event, and I really didn't want him to come to that because I really didn't want him to meet my friends yet. But I was kind of trying to, be open-minded and everything. So I was like, okay, you can come to this poetry event with me. And he showed up at my place wearing these periwinkle pants. I mean, I use the term lavender in the book, and that's very generous because I think they were periwinkle pants. And I'm not saying that a man can't wear periwinkle pants if he wants to. I think there were a couple of other offenses that did not make the outfit come together. Like he was wearing periwinkle pants that had been ironed and starched within an inch of their life. So there's this very starched crease down the middle of these pants. He's wearing some uncle sandals, and I feel like he might have had on some black church socks. I'm not for sure, but I feel like that was the case because I feel like I remember getting into. I was already like, oh my gosh, I'm taking a man wearing periwinkle pants to meet my friends. And then I remember when we got in his car, I looked down at his shoes, and I'm pretty sure he had like black church socks on underneath those sandals. And I was just like, I can't deal with this. I'm a terrible person for not being able to deal with this, but like, I cannot deal with this. Like, I can't, like, the way this whole thing is like coming together, it's too much. So yeah, you know, of course, like, I couldn't tell you what his name is now because, as I'm sure many people do, when you're dating casually, you know, it takes a while for a person to become important enough that their name matters to you to tell your friends, whatever. So this guy just became Mr. Lavender Pants, and that was how my friends knew how to refer to him.
I love that story.
I still can't believe that actually happened. Actually, my sister-in-law and I have a podcast called Here for the Donuts, where we eat donuts and have inappropriate conversation. And so just recently we recorded an episode where she interviewed me about the book, which was fascinating because she's in my real life, you know, so she's lived through like a lot of this book with me. And the questions that she asked were just amazing. I was like, this is my favorite interview. Her first question was, what's an Uncle Sandal? I was like, oh my gosh, this is the best. This is the best that I ever wanted.
Knew it was just going to go up from there.
Yes, I was like, this is great, because she's asking all the questions that I'm sure other people were like, what is that? But she was like, I really need to know. And I was like, you know, they're leather, but it's like they're like checkered across. So it's like you can see like a peak of the man's toes, but not his complete foot. That's the only way I know how to describe that. And this man still has socks on. So
oh my gosh, that is so brilliant. That is brilliant. And I just love how this all fits, informs such a bigger picture of life.
Yeah. Yeah. I was really hoping that people would feel their stories reflected in the book. I mean, you know, you're writing what's happening in your own life. You know that it will be rare that one person will, you know, sit down and read your book and go, oh my gosh, this is entirely me, you know, but I was hoping in my, you know, being able to be, you know, really honest and really vulnerable in some places, hoping that it would help other people's stories to feel more normal to them and to be able to laugh at yourself and at these ignorant moments of life. I mean, goodness, you know, I went on a date with this man with periwinkle pants whose name I can't remember at all. And that's a real thing that happened, you know?
That's great.
So I'll read from, this is actually chapter 34 of the book. And this poem is called Start With Your Roots. And for people who get the audiobook, there's actually an audio recording of this book with music. My husband produced music to this piece. So it is available there as well. So this poem I actually wrote while listening to Outkast's Aquemini. And on their Aquemini album, they have a song called Rosa Parks. And in the middle of Rosa Parks is this, it's like a hoedown. Sounds like a Southern hoedown. It's like fiddles and washboards, and it's an amazing Southern piece of music in the middle of this hip hop song. And I loved how Outkast, just as a hip hop group, that they've never been afraid of being fully themselves, you know, that they are these two black men, that they are these two black men from the South, that they love hip hop, that that's the generation they've grown up in, and just how they reflected all of that, you know, in their music. So I grew up mostly in the South. I moved around a lot, but I wanted to write a poem that would sort of reflect what some of that upbringing has meant to me. So this poem is included in the book. It's called Start With Your Roots. Start with your roots, back porch, harmonica, washboard, rhythm of picking beans, grandma saying, close the screen door behind you. It's okay to be proud to be from the South, to rep for hot summers, cobbler and watermelon sticky fingers, big mama and grandpa, mama and papa, to never wish for better luck or four-leaf clovers, because New Year's and black-eyed peas and collard greens because an itch in the palm of your hand means a payday is coming, because an itch on the nose means a surprise visitor is coming, because you protect your mama's back when you don't step on a crack, because when you see gray hair, you say, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, yes, sir, no, sir, because no matter how old you are, you respect your mama's house, grandma's hands. Kisses on mama's cheeks, dirt under granddad's fingernails from tending his garden, daddy, smelling like homemade oil changes and pork chops. Take that with you. Carry it. Wrapped in wax paper like grandma's chicken and chocolate cake. Take it in the car, on the bus, on the train, on the plane. Remember why she does this. Remember she knows the sting of sit in the back, of colored sections, colored entrance, colored water fountains, the long wait on road trips between stops and countertops that may not serve your kind here. She wraps food in wax paper the same way she hopes her prayers caress the brown skin of her children and children's children to keep them safe from noose and bullet and eyes and hands filled with hate. Take that with you. Read it on crinkly pages, like the family Bible with records of deaths and births and weddings and generations. Breathe it in, like the scent of candied yams and rain coming and magnolia trees, pig smokers and fried everything. Hold it in your chest, like grandma's voice. Sing it as well, like granddaddy giving thanks and holding hands at the head of the table. From there, you can grow. Become your own tree. Spread your branches and limbs. Make your own generations. Create a safe place to lean on and find shade. Be spring. Embrace summer. Fall, but always survive winter. Bloom. Then plant seeds. So they will be here long after your tree ceases to go through the seasons. Start with your roots and always return there.
Oh, bravo. That is so powerful. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah.
One of the things I love about your poetry is that, on the one hand, it's very singular to you and to your experience, but on the other, it just explores this commonality of emotion, of experience, of just the commonness of existence. It's really wonderful.
I interviewed an artist several years back, and in the interview, he told me that whenever I interview people, I always like to have like a signature question. And so back then, my signature question was asking people like what was a favorite quote of theirs. And one of his favorite quotes was a Lorraine Hansberry quote. And in the quote, she talked about how, to be a good writer, that you need to be general enough to be specific and specific enough to be general. And I thought that was so profound, because that's what I'm hoping to achieve in my writing, to write as myself, to write the way that I see the world, the way that I've experienced life. It's good, it's bad, it's ugly, those things. But also, even in the specificity of that there are these concrete details you can provide that other people will feel known as well. That you can be specific enough to be general too.
Absolutely. I found that in particular in your poem For Margaret, that it was just, even though different times and different, as you had said it in an interview once, that, she's Jewish. So, you're like her and yet you're not like her. But it just, a connection there that on the surface looks too different. But when you start mining it, there's so much of a commonness. It's just, think it's so wonderful. If we could, a colleague of mine was lucky enough to see you at the Q conference in Nashville this year. And
yeah.
He was telling me that he was able to attend your performance, and that you had shared a story about your first experience on a trip with Africa New Life, Woman to Woman.
Mm-hmm.
And that there was a question that a girl had posed to you. And he said that this was a really touching moment in your performance. Could you share what Woman to Woman is about, firstly? And then secondarily, would you mind sharing that story with our readers?
Oh, absolutely. So African New Life Ministries is a Rwandan ministry, and it's so vast, all of the things that African New Life does. But I had encountered the ministry in 2016, I'd had an opportunity to travel there in partnership with an event in Texas called If Gathering. And so while I was on that trip, I was the only Black woman on our trip. There were 37 women on our team, and I was the only Black woman there from America. So anytime, and I can't speak for everyone that's African American, but for myself and a lot of the African Americans in my community, anytime you go to an African country, there are all these, swirls of emotions that you feel about it. You feel proud, you feel at home, you also feel lost, and you lament that this is a place that your people were originally from, that a lot of that history was stolen away from you, as your ancestors were stolen from their home, So there's a lot of emotions that go into that, and I definitely felt that mix of emotions going to Rwanda, but I also was interested in going and experiencing what African New Life was doing, because African New Life is not founded by people from the West. It's founded by a Rwandan man and his family, and has grown to be just a Rwandan-led ministry. So while I was there, we were going to spend time with some high school girls at one of African New Life's boarding schools in Rwanda. And one of the American staff, she said, "Hey, can you share some of your poems and talk with the young women? Maybe you could talk to them about self-esteem or just anything you think that would be uplifting." And so I was a little nervous because I didn't have in my mind that I was going to have to do any talking or anything like that while I was there. So I was like, oh dear, okay. So, I went in and talked to the young women about, my mom and my sister. And I don't think a lot of them had seen Black people from America before. So they were, really interested in listening to what I was saying. And then I just opened it up for questions, which I normally would do in front of a teenage audience, because for some reason when I was a teenager, I longed for someone to open it up for questions. I don't know if that was just me or if that's like a teenage thing, but I just felt like if it was opened up for questions and there was something I wanted to ask, it was me getting the information out of that person that I wanted to know versus that person standing in front of us saying whatever they thought we should know. So anyway, I opened it up for questions, and one of the young women, she said to me, where are you from? And I was like, oh, I grew up in America. I was, born in South Carolina. I was telling her that. And she was like, no, I mean, where in Africa are you from? And so I had to explain to her the Atlantic slave trade, and had to explain to her, which I've been to Rwanda since that trip. I've been to Rwanda now 3 times. And every time that I've been, there has been some crowd of our Rwandan brothers and sisters that are not familiar with that story, that are not familiar with how Black people ended up in America. So I told her, that my ancestors originally lived in West Africa, and that they were stolen from their homes and taken to America to be enslaved. And most Black people from America do not know the country that their people came from, because none of that history was kept. You don't know the language your people originally spoke. And it was a really powerful moment for me to have to say those words out loud. And most of the women on our trip were white women. And so it was also a powerful moment for them to hear me articulating that. And after I explained the whole thing, the young woman looked at me and she said, well, then you are Rwandan. And of course, we all were between smiling and laughing and crying when she said that, because of course I'm knowing historically, I'm probably not Rwandan, my people probably did not come from Rwanda because it's in East Africa. But just this way that she and the young women there listened to me tell this hard story and welcomed me home. And being Black in America, it was beautiful to be welcomed home on the continent where my people were originally from. So that was the story that I was sharing at Q. And after I traveled to Rwanda in 2016, I really wanted to take a team of Black women from America back to Rwanda. And I wanted us to connect with as many women as we could there in Rwanda that are connected with African New Life Ministries. And so that's where the vision for Woman to Woman came to be. Woman to Woman was the name of the trip that I curated and led, and I just sent out emails to all of these Black women leaders I knew, and I was like, I'm going to Rwanda on this date. Will you come? Here's what we're going to be doing. And out of all those emails, 10 other women agreed to travel with me. And I co-led that trip with Latasha Morrison, who is the founder of Be the Bridge. And it was really beautiful. One of the things that African New Life Ministries does is they have these vocational training programs for women to help women learn a trade and be able to, provide for their families, in addition to the schooling and education that young women are getting there as a result of working with African New Life. So that was how the vision of Woman to Woman came to be. And we retold that story many times. We had to take turns because it just hurt all of us to have to share that story about the slave trade and just that history in America. And there were many times on our Woman to Woman trip when I had to articulate why we were from America. Our Rwandan sisters understood us living in America because Rwandan people live all over the world, so they were like, oh, it makes sense to us you live there, but what do you mean you were born there and your mother was born there and your grandmother, all the generations of your family were born in America, So explaining those things to them. And when we explained to them the Middle Passage, I remember this on our Woman to Woman trip, we explained to them the Middle Passage. We told the women that our ancestors were stolen from West Africa, that they were put on ships and stacked on top of each other like they were not human beings. And many of them didn't even survive the trip over in those ships from Africa over to America. And I had them look around at all of us. And I said, every woman in here that you see, those of us that are from America, we are the descendants of the people who survived that. So in some ways, there's some healing in saying those words out loud. And there's obviously a lot of heartbreak and lament. And so when we said those things to the women, they would put their hands on their chests and they would look at us and say, we are so sorry. Mm. And that was healing for us because I think there are a lot of rooms and spaces and environments here in America where I've told that story or heard someone else tell it. And sometimes there's this sentiment in the room, there's rolling of eyes. Why are we still talking about slavery? Why are we still stuck back there talking about that? And so to be in Africa and to have our Rwandan sisters lament with us was healing for us in so many ways. So I'm really excited about what Woman to Woman is going to become. We are returning to Rwanda for an all Black women trip in the summer of 2019. So I'll be posting soon some of the dates and things for that. And as well, I'm partnering with Latasha again with Be the Bridge, and we're doing an intentionally diverse trip over to Rwanda to try to dismantle some of the missions trip narrative that a lot of the trips to countries where brown people live are full of white Christians from the West, and that we need to change that, and that Black people and people of color need to also be a part of those trips, and that those trips should not be these places where we escape the things that we know America needs to do better. Those trips are places where we can learn from our Rwandan brothers and sisters, for example, how we can do some things better here in the States. So those are a few things that I was talking about there and that I'm really passionate about and love to partner with African New Life on.
That is amazing. And I just love the idea that these Rwandan sisters of yours, they in particular can understand coming from a place of lament, of historical lament,
Yep.
That's just so powerful. And you tapped on exactly into my question of what's next? What are the next steps for Woman to Woman? So I guess in closing, is there just anything that you just off the fly want to share? And then actually, maybe even before that, if you could just talk about how people can learn more about Woman to Woman or Be the Bridge, how can they get more information about that if they wanted to participate or aid it in some way?
Absolutely. If anyone wants more information about Woman to Woman, I believe that African New Life Ministries website, which I believe is africannewlife.org. I'm double checking everything right now in case I'm making things up, but I think it's africannewlife.org. I actually believe there's a page there. Yes, it's africannewlife.org/Amena. The dates are actually already chosen for June 2019. So if anyone of your listeners or readers are interested, they will be able to find the dates there. And we are finalizing a few plans, but we'll be talking more about that. So you can find out more about it on African New Life's website. You can find more about the ministry there. And of course, you can follow me on all my social media things. I am on all the things except Snapchat because I don't understand. So and for Be the Bridge, people can also go to the Be the Bridge website, which is beabridgebuilder.com. People can find out more about Latasha Morrison. She's not only a great friend of mine, but just also just a wonderful voice when we are talking about racial justice and talking about fighting against racism and fighting against white supremacy. So there's a lot of tools on that website. And for people who are interested in how racial reconciliation and racial justice can intersect and what that means for us in our daily life, and not only how we interact with people, but also how we participate in systems and structures, beabridgebuilder.com is a really, really great resource. There's lots of guides and different things for your church or your company or just in your personal life if you want to tap into those. I highly recommend it. And the only other thing I wanted to talk about is that I do have a new podcast that I would love people to listen to. I launched my podcast last month, and it's called Her with Amena Brown. And it is me interviewing women on a theme. So the theme for season 1 is body. And we are about, at the time of this recording, we're about 5 episodes in right now. And so far I've interviewed someone about training the body. I've interviewed someone about the body politic. I've interviewed someone about pastoring the body of Christ. And each episode kind of has a different play on the word body. So it's been really great just to be able to share the stories of women, in particular women of color, and doing what I can just to elevate the voices that are marginalized, to give more sound and more volume to those leaders. So, yeah, that's all I can think of.
And that's quite a lot. Well, Amena, I cannot thank you enough. Just for letting us know about this podcast. I look forward to going and listening to these. So again, thank you so much for your time and your amazing talent, and for lending your voice to women who might not otherwise, it's not that they don't have a voice, but they might not have a platform to make it known to others. So thank you for all the work you do and for spending some time with us today.
Thanks for having me.
Take care.
Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.